Today on Locked On Rockies, they might have lost last night, but Ryan McMahon continues to have one of his greatest offensive streaks ever. Will it continue? Is this the best Rymac the Rockies have seen?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 30th day of May in the year 2022. I am your 2023. I am your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, we thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Shout outs to our everydayers out there. Birddogs is bringing you today's episode. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonmlb. And when you enter promo code LockedOnMLB, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler. Looks like this. I drink my water out of it there with every order. Check it out. I'm also wearing my Birddog shorts right now. We are here on your favorite streaming service, free, of course. We're also streaming live on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can let us know what you want to hear about the Rockies. You want to talk about the Rockies. You got hot takes about the Rockies. Well, that's the place to send them. Today on the show, we're talking Ryan McMahon. We're going to talk about that game against the one and only Arizona Diamondbacks, as they continue to be a real thorn in the side of the Rockies and in the NL West in general. This is a team that's playing good ball and a team that is kind of interesting when you're looking at each of the potential when you're looking at kind of the random NL West team to make an impact this fall, coming closer to the end of the season. It might be Arizona. I don't necessarily know if San Diego has to figure it out. San Diego clearly has on paper the players and things to straighten things out and get organized, but Arizona just, man, they seemed, I know they were, Carl Kaufman has really not been necessarily great to start his MLB career with the Rockies so far. If you're curious about Kaufman here, 11.37 ERAs in 12 innings pitched so far, 7 strikeouts, a whip of 2.29. This is after 3 starts. Has given up at least 4 earned runs in each of those 3 starts, walked at least 2 batters in all of those as well. So hasn't necessarily gone great for Kaufman, but it's also not necessary when you're looking at it and when you're kind of analyzing it. It's also unfortunate for Kaufman, who probably it was a little rushed and brought things up because of the Rockies' lack of starting pitching depth. And kind of going through it right now, if you're really thinking about it and when you're breaking things down. But there's nothing much that he's kind of showing right now that shows that he has a dominant edge or some sort of ability to get major league batters out, because, man, they were loud outs yesterday. There were big home runs. Arizona, and honestly, the worst part is you kind of should have been able to settle into hopefully a little bit more of a groove when you start the game off with a 4-run lead. That's got to help you build your confidence, and you can't just let them answer right back and build those opportunities up. It really an unfortunate turn for the Rockies, who were looking to continue and start this road series out with a nice hot start to follow up taking down the Mets. That's kind of the big thing there. I know the Mets are scuffling a little bit, but it's a good team the Rockies have now beat in a season series, and it kind of reflects the Rockies as a May. And this game as well, yesterday as well, it's a Rockies team that has potential, and it's a little bit closer to this Rockies team that we talked about and thought about in the preseason and with some of the what ifs before all the injuries kind of started racking up. Since dealing with all these injuries and everything, the Rockies have been the second best team, had the second best record in the National League in the month of May, other than the Dodgers. That's pretty impressive. And I believe I heard on the broadcast, the Rockies have won 6 of their last 8 series. That's a very solid stretch for the Colorado Rockies and a complete flip of what they were doing there in the start of April. So it's kind of a moment here where it's like, wow, what are the Rockies? Man, this Rockies team's got something. They got a little bit of this. They got a little bit of that. But then games like last night happen. And you're reminded where it's like, oh, man, the Rockies really don't have starting pitching depth. Oh man, some of these, it's just like, what's the move when you continue to do this? And when then you look at Arizona on the flip, where it's young, it's fast, it's offense, it's aggression, it's stealing bases. It's kind of a different, again, that when we had the crossover with Millard Thomas, and when we preview this, it's just the different identities and mindsets of the two teams. When you look at these two teams, even though the Rockies have played better baseball and even and a solid second month, they're not as exciting as Arizona. They're not as fun as Arizona. I don't look at the Rockies the same way when I'm watching some of the of these Arizona teams. And even though the Rockies were in situations to win that game last night, and Arizona hasn't necessarily dominated this season, there's something about them and their willingness to play some of their players and their play style that makes me wish that the Rockies were doing that. I kind of, and I don't think that's a very surprising statement to say, especially if you've listened to the pod and listened to things that I think the Rockies should be doing more of and change their organizational philosophy around. The Rockies, however, have some really interesting players and some players that are doing some really interesting stuff. And that's highlighted by no one more than Ryan McMahon, a player that I think, if you've been following the Rockies, if you are a diehard Rockies fan, you had a lot of attention on this player this year, Ryan McMahon, because this is a guy that's supposed to lead this team, not only as a leader in the clubhouse, but a leader in statistical categories. This is a guy that's waiting we, the fans, have been waiting to really see take a step forward offensively and become a dominant force at third base, or become the dominant player that the Rockies believe that he can be. And we're seeing flashes of that. And we're seeing the possibilities of Ryan McMahon really making a case to be an elite infield player, which has a whole multitude of possibilities for the Rockies, their future, Ryan McMahon's future as a whole, all sorts of interesting stuff. Let's dive in to the Ryan McMahon conversation. Let's look at some stats. Let's look at the month of May for him, and let's talk about the guy here who might be entering one of his best stretches at a potentially peak moment in his career. When you're looking at some type of when you take in some factors here. Let's do that here coming up in segment number 2. But before we do that, got to tell you about our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has you covered when it comes to the sports gambling world. Folks, our Denver Nuggets are about to tip off against the Miami Heat, and FanDuel's got you covered all NBA Finals long. And right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. They got the simple, easy-to-use app. You can go and check it out there on the App Store. It's safe and secure. You get paid out instantly as well. Simple, easy sportsbook action, all available at FanDuel. And on top of it all, you can get that no sweat first bet. There's no better place to bet on all the NBA Finals action other than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. We're live on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel where you can be part of the show, just like Lux Ace when he says what Arizona is doing is what we should have been doing this year and in the next couple of years, letting their young talent play led by veteran players. That's technically what the Rockies are trying to do. And when you look at it, the Rockies have kind of that blueprint. But at some point, you have to kind of move off from how much veteran leadership and veteran presence you have on your team, especially when you have a couple of veteran players that you can count on to be your guys. The Rockies have vets. It's the other veterans on these teams, and it's a Mike Moustakas, it's a Jurickson Profar, it's a CJ Cron. Realistically, how much do these teams add to your team? Of course, we've seen great Profar with the longest on base streak, tied for it in baseball last night. Who's I think picking things up and really making a case for himself that he is still a perfectly serviceable and effective outfielder at the major for a major league ball club. Be interested to see what the approach with Profar is going to be here. But this is a team that needs to fully embrace letting the young guys play and embrace just having a couple of veterans. Do the Todd and the Toddlers again with Chris Bryant and Charlie Blackmon and Kyle Freeland in your rotation. You can play more young guys. It's a better move for the Rockies. But the question about Ryan McMahon gets complicated. The Rockies love Ryan McMahon. I mean, I think this is abundantly clear. I think the Rockies for a long time have believed highly in Ryan McMahon. The contract says so. The way that they just the idea, and I feel like just when they hear stuff about the Rocks, Ryan McMahon's always kind of included in that conversation. I think with him being so valued by the club, it's hard for me to think that the Rockies would ever move on from him. But there's going to be a lot of teams interested in Ryan McMahon if he keeps playing like this. This is the Ryan McMahon we were hoping to see, and this is the Ryan McMahon that is your stud, one of your studs, and a player that you can add into your infield to make another dynamic, dynamite, really good defensive infield with offensive potential. I mean, Ryan McMahon, if he keeps this up, which is the biggest question about it, or keeps up an improved offensive performance and consistent offense, Ryan McMahon's going to turn into a stud. I mean, you can't argue against the glove. It's been the frustrating at-bats. It's been the strikeouts. It's been the inability to drive runners in clutch situations that kind of gets in the way and frustrates you about Ryan McMahon. But that has not been the case over the last few games and over the last couple of weeks for Ryan McMahon. Last 7 games for Ryan McMahon, 462 average, 563 OBP, slugging a 1.077. In that time, he's driven in 13 runs off of 14 home runs, 12 hits in 26 at-bats, scored 7 times, stole a base, and he's tied in hits and strikeouts and walks at 6-6. Going even further back to 15 games, 352 average, 453 OBP, slugging percentage of 704, another stolen base. He has more strikeouts to walks, though, so an increase in those strikeouts, 15 to 10 strikeout to walks, but 15 RBI, 4 home runs, 19 hits. He's doubled his home run total in the last 7 games to give himself 8 home runs on the season. He's scored, he's driven in over a third, nearly half of his RBI on the season in the past 7 games. The past 30 really have been over half of his RBI. He has come alive this month to be a solid hitter. Last 30 games for Ryan McMahon overall. Let's finish up the splits here, and I'm getting these from MLB.com in case you're curious. Last 30 games for Rymac, 264 average, an OBP of 347, a slugging of 491. He's got 110 at-bats in this time, 29 hits, 4 home runs, 19 RBI, 14 walks, and 34 strikeouts with 3 stolen bases. You'd like to see the strikeout numbers still go down, but if you have been watching the game, if you've been seeing things, Ryan McMahon was getting a little squeezed on some strike zones and has had some of that happen this year too, but that's not nearly enough. That doesn't, that doesn't cover a huge chunk of those. But you're just seeing it go down. I mean, when you're looking at the numbers though, the strikeouts are improving. In the last 15, he's got 34 strikeouts in overall, down to 15 over the so less than half of those strikeouts have come in the last year or the last 15 games. And even closer to 6 strikeouts. So, I mean, a little bit better on the pace of that. And it's especially, I think, important there when you're looking at the last 7 games and the stat line there of McMahon, when you're looking at the worrisome strikeout numbers and the striking out concerns that you've had from Rymac. 6-6 walkout to strikeout ratio. That makes me feel better when I see strikeouts and walks close. It makes me feel better. I know it's always going to be it's easier to strike out. It's more likely to strike out. So it was, that's just, I'm giving you kind of my personal, how I feel when I'm assessing walking, strikeouts, this and that. And as Lux Ace points out, umpire really called it down the middle fastball ball yesterday. We have seen some questionable umpiring of late across baseball, I would say. And that goes for, and that goes for a lot of teams, including, both sides of the ball yesterday for the Rockies. But to go even back into those strikeouts for Ryan McMahon, he has still struck out once in every game, has only got 1 walk in the last 3 games. But in that time, home run in every game. He goes and he picks up multi-hit games in the last 3 games. And he's driven in multiple runs in the past 3 games as well. So it's clear. I mean, it's a simple thing to say. But a big reason for the Rockies' turnaround and the Rockies' success is Ryan McMahon, especially with getting it done with the long ball. Hitting home runs is very important. And Thomas Harding tweeted out that the home run is slowly returning for the Rockies. And again, that's a good thing. And it's an important thing because we saw it in last night's game, especially. There's so many opportunities, so many runners left in scoring position. The best way to not deal with it, clear the bases. And Ryan McMahon's not just hitting home runs. He's hitting moonshots. I mean, he is crushing the baseball when he makes contact. This version of Ryan McMahon is an elite all-star level caliber player. This is someone that can help your team win. I don't think we've seen enough of Ryan McMahon to know that I think I think he's going to be closer to kind of pits and valleys type of player where he's going to kind of go through good and bad stretches as most players do, maybe a little bit more exaggerated in the cases for McMahon. But I think that this is going to be a moment for him to really shine. I think he's going to continue to highlight who he is, and it's going to pan out in 2 ways for the Rockies. It's going to pan out the Rockies reigniting their confidence in Ryan McMahon, doubling down, reinvesting, emphasizing, believing in Ryan McMahon, which would really change the outcome of Eleris Montero and where you're going to put him and things of that nature. Or he's going to impress, and the Rockies are going to get an enticing package for him, and the Rockies are going to be able to to move Ryan McMahon to a team that would be looking for something to get the starting pitching to absolutely boost this pitching farm system. This level of play for Ryan McMahon can open the door for the Rockies to get some solid pitching prospects back. Ryan McMahon, if he's performing offensively and continues to do so, is a Gold Glove caliber player, infielder who can play multiple positions, ideally third base, that can hit for power and has years control on contract, I believe. Ryan McMahon's got, I think, a couple of years on the contract. I'll double check. But that's a trade piece. That's something you consider at the deadline. Ryan McMahon is someone, if he continues to play like this, is a very, very interesting option for the Colorado Rockies. So yeah, he is signed until 2028. He could still, like I said, that if it's the other side, then the Rockies have control of Ryan McMahon until that time. And Ryan McMahon is entering really peak time of most athletes' career at 28 years old. You have, if Ryan McMahon is truly striding into the player that it is long believed that he is capable of being, it opens up a whole world of doors for the Rockies, depending on what they want to do. And the question was asked earlier in the live chat: would you have Brendan Rodgers or Ryan McMahon? And that's a question the Rockies are going to have to ask themselves. They're going to have to, if they want to commit to Ryan McMahon full for this whole time and they want to do everything, they're going to have to keep him at first base. So you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do with Montero. You're going to have to figure out what you're going to do with Tolia. Locked on MLB prospects, Lindsey Crosby tells us Tolia might be able to move into the outfield, but the outfield's already cluttered. It complicates things. That question of if you're sticking with both McMahon and Rodgers, you have Tovar there at shortstop. What do you do? Then you definitely have to trade CJ Cron. Because if you keeping Ryan McMahon and sticking with it means that you're not playing Montero at third base. I think that experiment, the Rockies, I don't think are going to go back to playing Montero at third base other than off days for Rymack. I don't think Rymack's going anywhere from third base now. The Rockies value that defense too much. It is, there are lots of moves the Rockies could consider and can consider around. And Luxay says, why would we trade Rymack? Because Rymack is a MLB quality player that a lot of teams are going to need someone like him. A lot of teams are going to be looking for a power hitting infielder that can play elite level defense for a postseason push. They're going to have to leverage, they're going to have to consider the contract. They're going to have to consider what it would take. But this is a guy that has hit a home run now in 3-4 straight games. This is a guy that's driving in multiple runs, all while being one of the, you're confident in the defense. He is certainly the most if this pace of play continues up into the trade deadline, Ryan McMahon is 1,000% your most interesting trade piece. CJ Cron's not going to get you much. CJ Cron needs to be traded, but he is not going to get you he's not going to get you a starter. He's not going to get you really that great of a prospect. CJ Cron, unfortunately, has not been the same player for an extended period of time since the All-Star game. But he's still also a piece. He's not as interesting as Ryan McMahon to a team. A power hitting first baseman that's a free agent at the end of the year is not nearly as interesting. Trading for Ryan McMahon is a big change in organizational move as well. It's a team trading for a player they believe in committing to, because you have to take on the contract. So, what are you going to do? How do you handle it? It's going to be very tricky for the Rockies. And the answer, do I want Brendan Rodgers or Ryan McMahon? To be totally honest, if McMahon continues at this, I want both. And then I want first base to be Montero and Tolia. Tovar, once he learns how to not swing at a slider on the outside I'm really encouraged by. But the Rockies having two very solid veterans there in the infield are great. And if Brendan Rodgers, the issues with the injuries continue, you're going to be able to move on. I'm just saying, unfortunately, I really don't want this to happen, but you can move on. So there is the potential at KB at first. That sounds like it did not sound like that's a big time possibility coming anytime soon. So, but Leandro, I got to disagree. Crone hasn't even been in the lineup for a while there. So you can tell us all of your live thoughts, and actually, Leandro, here you put up a good point. Miami could use multiple players from the Rockies. They could use Elias Diaz as well. I mean, a power hitting catcher. I mean, the Mariners could use Ryan McMahon. Anybody in the playoff hunt that it has a second baseman or a third baseman that's underperforming or just kind of middle of the road or not enough, a team certainly would be interested in making an upgrade in Ryan McMahon. All right. Let's take a break real quick here and then do a little game preview of segment number 3 and kind of put a bow on what our thoughts on everything here on today's episode after this word from our friends. Rockies take on the Diamondbacks, game number 2 tonight here. Looking for a bounce back dub for the Rockies. Would love to see them get out ahead and jump out early. Man, I did not know the Diamondbacks were 31-23. That's basically the flip of the Rockies, who are 24-31. But certainly, Rockies were in that game last night. Something that's been kind of frustrating there against this team. This Diamondbacks team is the Rockies just have never been. It's just slobber knocker slugfests against these clubs all the time. So it's just been frustrating, to say the least. The Diamondbacks have currently beat the Rockies now in 3 of 4 games this year, and the Diamondbacks have scored at least 6 runs in 3 of those 4 games. 7, actually, if you got that. The Rockies have only held them to under 6 runs or 7 runs once in the overall series, regular season series. So that's an example of this Diamondbacks team, certainly better on offense and aggressive and seasoned against Rockies pitching. Kyle Freeland, who's got plenty of experience against the Diamondbacks, going up against Zach Gallen tonight. It's going to be one of the better matchups, probably easily the best pitching matchup of the series tonight. Gallen has been good. Rockies, if they want to have a chance, again, it's got to come by getting out early. They are just the Diamondbacks are going to be aggressive all game long. We saw that last night. We've seen it all season so far in these matchups. So this is a Rockies team that's got to do what they did last night, and you got to be able to lean on your veteran starter in that situation. You hope that if you can recreate the situation last night, do some early damage, that you can lean on Kyle Freeland to go deep into the game, at least in the 6th and the 7th, which is honestly a must, really. This is a Rockies bullpen that has been used a lot. This is a Rockies bullpen that has is starting to show those signs of overuse. And this is a Rockies bullpen that's had to do a lot of heavy lifting for this rotation due to the injury. So the Rockies need Kyle Freeland tonight. He is the most important Rocky in the game tonight, is Kyle Freeland. He's got to have a good start tonight if the Rockies want to have a chance here to get this game back. You can catch all the action on SiriusXM and on the SiriusXM app. Don't miss out. Search Locked On Rockies on SiriusXM, and that's going to be where you need to go. Oh, or just Rockies, and you can select the feed of your choice. Folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Good conversation today. Good big picture stuff. Kind of some interesting storylines starting to develop about the Rockies. Let me know if you think the Rockies should trade Ryan McMahon, keep him, or what they should do, and your thoughts on his hot play and how the Rockies can take down the Diamondbacks in the comments below. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And thank you, Lux Ace, Leandro, Mikolo, if I'm saying that right. I might not be, for tuning into the show live here, which you can be a part of by subscribing to the Locked On Rockies on YouTube. Folks, back in action tomorrow, right here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. We'll catch you on the Flippity Flip.